find it. Hello, Internet Tidal Club. We're just testing if you can hear me and Lucy.
Hello.
Please say so in the chat. That'd be really handy.
It's popped up. I can see it, Alex.
Good. So the stream's there.
It's just my face really big though, and your face really small.
I don't know if we can kind of make it a bit more. There we go. Okay, yeah. It'll take a while before it happens on the stream, but yeah, we're now side by side. Okay. Everyone says it works. That's good. Okay, we're going to wait a minute or two. We may as well start on time.
This would be a perfect moment for us to have a jingle.
I did think about that. We do need a Tidal Club jingle. So if anyone wants to make one, then we could play it at this point. Maybe that could be a thing. Like everyone can make their own Tidal Club jingle, and we could pick one at random. We've luckily Lucy and I are really good beatboxers, so.
We did try once to sing a Tidal Club in the old iteration of Tidal Club.
Yeah, I can't remember how it went. It was something like do Tidal Club. But,
it had do-do-dos in it.
Yeah, sure. it went on for quite a while, I think. Didn't really know how to stop. It was a horror.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, we had an idea of doing like regular Tidal Club videos, and we recorded one, and it was so bad that it wasn't that bad. We just didn't really know what we were doing, and then we ran out of time.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Sure. For sure.
Okay. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. Okay, so I think we can say that we've actually started. Good morning, everyone, and good night, and all that. I'm here with Lucy Cheeseman, who is founder of the Tidal Club idea, which started off as a physical meeting in Sheffield. What was the idea of it, Lucy?
The idea was, the original idea wasn't really what it ended up being. So the idea was that any interested party could get together once a month to just mess about with Tidal, which I sort of wanted to do because I wanted more time just to mess about with Tidal. And I felt like all the time I spent with Tidal was like preparing for gigs and not really like exploring new stuff as much as I'd like to. But it ended up being a bit more, we'd get together every month and me and Alex would help people with Tidal. But that was also good and positive. It just wasn't quite what we set out to do. But one of the things that was really good about it was we did this sort of function of the month bit where we might learn about something new that had been added in Tidal recently, or a sort of bit of lesser known functionality, or something a bit cool, which was really good, which I think that's why we started trying to make the videos before, but didn't go very well.
Yeah, I think function of the month was really good. Maybe we should have function of the week as part of this online Tidal Club. Maybe we'll start that this week now that we've got through the mini notation stuff. I really find it difficult to say mini notation. I've really realised that this over the last week. It's got, I don't know, is it too many n's in it or something?
It's a bit of a tongue twister.
So we
mini
need to come
notation.
up. Yeah, if anyone's got a better acronym for it or something, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm rambling. So the idea was that we'd talk about, like, so far I've just kind of gone through the mechanics of the mini notation, but I haven't really talked about live coding itself. And this is something which Lucy and I ran something called the Live Coding Summer School last summer, and Lucy's done lots of other workshops, but we did this workshop, and realised that people really appreciated talking about the actual practice as well. So I thought that's what we could do today. So maybe we could talk about the process of becoming a live coder. We've had different experiences of this, but so how did you get into live coding, Lucy? Is that a good way to start?
So how did I get into live coding? I just started making music using a computer. So previously, in a previous life, I was a drummer, for a long time when I was younger, not a very good one. But I had a sort of break. I hadn't played any music for a few years, and I was sort of fed up with playing drums because it's quite like a big and unwieldy and like difficult instrument that you can't really practice at home very easily. It's quite hard to make music by yourself. You're always dependent on a band. It's really heavy to carry around, etc., etc. And also, I wasn't very good at it. So I started making music with a computer, and I was involved with went to some workshops run by Yorkshire Sound Women Network, and particularly a workshop run by Joanne Armitage and Shelley Knotts, which was an introduction to live coding, and it was an all-day workshop just for women. And they went through how to use Ixylang, which is a really great and very quick to learn bit of live coding software, and then also started learning about live coding using Super Collider. And it was a really great day, really exciting, and I was very energized by it. And before that, I hadn't really known what live coding was. Like I'd met Joanne, and it told me that's what she did, but I didn't really know anything about it. And so I went away, and I was very excited. And at that point, so I've got a Windows laptop, and at that point, you couldn't run Ixylang on Windows. So I was sort of trying to get my head around Super Collider, which I just found extremely difficult. And I was sort of plugging away at it. And then at some point during this period, Alex was doing a talk on Tidal in Sheffield, and I went along to it, and I got very excited by how kind of immediate it seemed in terms of a way of exploring rhythms and exploring sounds. And I went away, and I spent 3 days trying to install it, and eventually managed, with the help of some videos by Mike Hodnick on YouTube, which in those days it was a lot more complicated than it is now, believe it or not. And
it's easy.
I just got very excited. I got very excited and just started going through examples on the internet and practicing. And then I bumped into Alex at a gig a few weeks later, and I went up to him and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm using Tidal. It's great. It's the best thing ever." And then he said, "I'll book you for an algo." And then the rest is history. And that was in 2016, I think, 4 years ago. So it's gone really quick. I feel like still I'm quite new, but I'm obviously not.
Yeah, I mean, you have done a lot of collaborations in that time and kind of pushed live coding in different directions. It would actually take quite a long time to go through them all, but maybe we should. I mean, it's pretty amazing actually. So you've done death rock live coding. Is it rock?
Black metal.
Black metal.
Call it.
Sorry.
Atmospheric black metal, which is my band, True Yorkshire Cult Ensemble. So we don't use Tidal. We use Foxstop. Well, that's myself and my friend Laurie, who we sort of dress up in robes and make black metal. And it sort of started as a joke in our group chat, and then it became real. And now we play quite a lot of shows. And then me and Laurie are also in a band called Type with Ryan Kirkbride and Innocent Granger. So Ryan is the creator of Foxdot, and we use Foxdot on a piece of software called Troop that Ryan also made to collaborate, which is great because you can practice over the internet with your friends, and you can use Troop for Tidal as well. Me and Alex do that in our band Epiplocky. So they're my kind of main collaborations that are active. In the past, I've been in a band called Heavy Bleeding with live musicians. There was a band called Bloodsport in Sheffield who were very interested in complicated rhythmical structures, and we put together a collaboration for the first Alchemec, was it? Alex, do you remember? The second one?
Second one, yeah. The
second Alchemec Festival.
Yeah, something we organised in Sheffield.
Yeah. And which was extremely fun and an interesting challenge, kind of playing with live musicians. And I think really made me kind of think be a lot more aware and a lot more intentional with my Tidal practice. And I think that really helped me get a lot better and really develop my kind of style, I would say, which is a bit of a woolly word that kind of doesn't really mean anything. But I think that definitely pushed me in a new direction. I think before that I was kind of sort of very much messing around, which I am still a bit, but I'm intentionally messing around now rather than unintentionally messing around, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So there's quite a few threads there, but I suppose you mentioned Foxdot and Ixielang,
Hmm.
and there aren't actually that many people who jump between different languages. I mean, some people do visual live coding and audio live coding, but they normally pick one. Um, so, how, how does it compare, like working with Foxdot and working with Tidal? Because you said you're a percussionist, which I think is. I've noticed that quite a few Tidal people do come from a percussion background. It tends to be that kind of focus on rhythm, would you say? Or
Yeah, I think so. So I think um, for me, I mean, really, the main difference is almost nothing to do with, for me, is almost nothing to do with the language and actually to do with the fact that I tend to use Tidal solo and I tend to use Foxdot in collaboration and in a band. And I think, like, quite often when we talk about live coding and when we talk about what it is and how to do it and how to approach it, we think very much about programming languages, and we don't think so much necessarily about like sound or about a creative process, which is something, as you know, Alex, I'm very interested in. But I think, like, with Foxdot, I think Tidal for me is I find it more expressive for the stuff that I want to do, because I'm very interested in rhythm and I'm really interested in playing with samples. And obviously you can use synths in Tidal, but if you see any of my live sets, I'm predominantly using samples. And I'm very interested in kind of like squashing sounds in a way that they become something that they aren't originally. Whereas Tidal is a lot more melodic, and
Foxdot
I
is
think
more
as well,
melodic.
big a Foxtrot, sorry,
Yeah.
is more melodic, yeah. But I think because I know you and I know Ryan, who made Foxtrot, it's interesting because I think your musical interests are really very very well reflected in the software that you've made, which is really nice. So Ryan's a lot more interested in like melodies and harmonies and all that kind of side of things. And I think you're much more interested in rhythms, and so I think that comes out very clearly. I also think that Foxdot is less mysterious than Tidal. Like, I think when I'm doing stuff in Tidal, I don't always know what's going to happen. In fact, I often don't necessarily know what's going to happen when I write a line of code. Like, maybe when I start, but I might write a simple line of code or write a simple rhythm and then kind of change that and change it and change it to a point where I hit run and I don't know exactly what it's going to sound like. Whereas I think you've got a bit of that in Foxdot, but it tends to be a lot more kind of controlled, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I think Tidal's kind of unknowable by design. Um,
Yeah.
and
But I love
but
that about it. That's not
yeah,
a criticism, by the way. It's my favorite thing about it. It's like, oh, where are we going? Okay, over
yeah.
there, fine.
You're kind of collaborating with this weird thing you're making as you go. But maybe that kind of that mystery, that lack of mystery, is actually helpful when in collaborations with Foxdot. Like if you are a bit more clear about the relationship between what you're hearing and what you're working on, especially if there's like 3 or 4 people working at the
Yeah,
same time, maybe that's quite helpful.
absolutely. And I think it's easier. Like, I've noticed when I play collaborative sets, using Foxdot versus using Tidal, I feel much more confident kind of going in and editing somebody else's code.
Mm,
Whereas I think with Tidal, I think especially because I only kind of use quite a small subset of Tidal, like I don't actually use that many functions. And I think, like, if I play a set with you or when I was doing the collaboration with Graham Dunning, you both have such different approaches that it can be sometimes a bit more difficult to kind of jump in and start going, oh, I'm going to mess about with what Alex did. And it's more like you're kind of doing your own separate thing. Whereas I
yeah.
think Foxtrot, again, a bit because that's how I've always played it, as being like in the band and in collaboration. I've never played I don't think I've ever played a solo Foxtrot set. And I think that it's much more about like how you're going in and re-editing someone else's code, or how
Mm,
you're all kind of slowly forming something towards a coherent whole in quite a different way. And definitely I think the language, for me, it feels like it makes that quite an easy thing to do.
mm.
Even just the way it's kind of laid out and the way the syntax works. Um,
Yeah, it's not
and
something I've thought
Foxtrot's
about
fun.
before. It's interesting. But we're talking about using Foxdot with Troop, which lets you work on it like a Google document. So everyone's editing each other's code. And there's a thread about I can't remember what it's called, but something about network music or collaboration on the forum. And I've actually linked in a performance from Type. So that's Lucy's band with Ryan and Laurie and Innocent. And I'm pretty sure it's Type, and I'm pretty sure it's using Foxdot. So you can also see what Foxdot's like there from the masters. So yeah. So you're talking about using a subset of functions, and this is something we've talked about before in terms of how we prepare for a set. And I'm the same. I mean, there's no way, even though I made a lot of these functions, there's no way I have them all in my head when I go to performance. Unlike everyone else, I just go to the Tidal website and quickly flick through the reference and try and remember what everything does. And actually, it helps to constrain yourself to just a few functions that you have in your head. It's not a case of trying to learn the whole of Tidal and have that at your fingertips. I think it doesn't work that way. Would you agree, Lucy? It's sort of It's about having a few functions, maybe ones that you don't know that well sometimes as well, where you're kind of still exploring them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tidal can be, thinking about like people who are potentially experiencing Tidal for the first time, who are part of the course. I think it can be quite overwhelming, and I think there's a lot there. And I think particularly because it can be a bit unpredictable, it can be a bit difficult to get your head around. But I think like definitely restricting yourself to a few functions. I mean, at the start, I restricted myself to a really small amount of functions because they were the only ones I knew. And I actually looked for. I've got like the crib sheet I wrote myself from my first ever gig, but it's at my studio, so I can't show you. But maybe when we get let out of lockdown, I'll like scan it and post it on the forum so you can see. But I think I literally had like 4 or 6 functions on there, and then the mini notation, and that's what I used to play like my test sets, which like, you know, admittedly weren't amazing. I think actually also my first ever set's on YouTube, so if you want to watch it, you can find it and see. Look at me laughing to myself with like doing things that I was not intending to do at all. But yeah, I think that for me, like when I'm preparing, I tend to more start from like I might get some new samples, like find some new sounds or something, and then I'll sit and practice. I always practice before a show, but I don't like to practice too much because I think you don't want to be like over prepared either. So I might sit and be like, okay, let's mess about with these like 3 new samples I've got, and that's when I'll use like my like go-to. I have like favorite functions I always use. Like I think loop at is my favorite function. Okay. But I really use like loop at. I don't even know. Like fast and slow, obviously. Iter, jux. That's it. I don't use anything else. Cut, chop, chop. Cut something.
Chop's good.
Cut something. Yeah. Chop's good. Striate. I sometimes use.
Yeah. I definitely use fewer if I'm doing a gig where I'm not actually projecting my code. Like normally people want to see the code and so I project it, but sometimes I'm doing a gig somewhere where it's part of a normal lineup and there's no projection, and then I'll definitely use fewer functions. So and I think that's because I'm just focusing on the music and which tells me that actually the more you focus on the music, the fewer functions you use. So maybe we should always just not worry about the complexity of the code and just go for like I really like using chunk at the moment. Iter sometimes. JuxRev I just overuse far too much.
Is it even a Tidal set if you haven't done JuxRev at some point? I don't think it is.
Yeah. JuxRev is If you're doing a drinking game, then JuxRev is the one that you probably shouldn't pick.
As a disciple, I'll tell you what else you use a lot. You use offad, ply, which I don't even know what ply does. No idea.
That's something I used for a while and then stopped using, not because
you've retired ply.
I didn't like it, but because I've just forgotten about it. It's like when I take on a new function, I forget an old one. But ply is fun.
Weave is a great Tidal function, and I occasionally will learn it well enough to use it in a gig, and I'm always really pleased when I do. But it's just something I can't get in my head. I need to write it down on a piece of paper how to do it. So
Yeah,
I
Weave
can,
is amazing, and I've got one thing that I do with it, but I wouldn't use it creatively in the live set 'cause it's just too complicated. It's too much to think
yeah,
about. But
it's
I've got
hard.
particularly a set piece that I use for Weave.
But also, listeners, we're talking from a perspective where me and Alex both usually start with a blank screen, which
Yeah,
is a big debate in live coding as to whether you should do everything from scratch while people are watching or if you should copy and paste stuff. I actually think it doesn't really matter.
yeah,
I just think it's fun starting with a blank screen. I enjoy it personally because it means I kind of go in whatever direction, and I've always done it. I think even from the start, I've no occasionally, like when I did the collaboration with Bloodsport, I had written all my code largely in advance because of the nature of the collaboration. But I don't, yeah, it's a big hot debate. I don't care. I think you should do what you want and enjoy yourself.
yeah.
Personally,
I don't think. Yeah, it's not a debate in Sheffield. I think because we just yeah, people do what they want. I think for me, I do sometimes do performances that are less from scratch than others. Like I had to do a 2 hour set to a largely empty field in Glastonbury Festival. And to do 2 hours, there's no way that could be all from scratch. And if I'm doing something where people are, it's like a conventional club and people will want to dance, then I feel like it's nice to have set pieces which you just have there that you work through, and there's some things that I won't have it in written in advance, but there's things that I've done lots of times before, and so it's pretty much it's not a from scratch performance if you're just typing in things that you have in your head.
yeah,
um,
exactly. Is that so you could memorize like 1,000 lines of code and just type them all out from scratch, or
yeah, it
just
might come out differently each time. So there's a real spectrum here, and yeah, just do what you want
I think do what you want and
is
just enjoy the music that you're making. Like for me, that's the my favorite thing about Tidal is just like you can sit down at Tidal with no ideas really and just start messing about. And as Alex says, go on the website and look at a few functions you haven't used before and try to apply them to the sounds
mm,
that you've got. And you can go off in these like really exciting directions.
yeah.
And it's like I think it's just so much more fruitful than like trying to sit down with Ableton or something, for me anyway.
Yeah, and you were saying that you go with a few new sounds as well, and that's quite important um, to freshen things up. It's not just one way of doing it is to learn a new function because then that function can be used with all the other functions and so it kind of freshens them up. But really, the best thing is just to add a couple of new sounds. You can go to
Yeah,
freesound.org or just get a
Freesound.
microphone and yeah,
Shout out to
freesound.org is
freesound.org.
yeah,
We love
it's like a
Freesound.
database of free sounds that you can use. Uh, and yeah, yeah, new sounds are also important. Right, I think we might have some questions, which is good because we said we'd
Oh,
talk
good.
for 10 minutes and we've gone for 20. So,
Sorry.
so the first question, can you see them there? Shall I? I'll read them out anyway.
No,
How
because
hard?
if I watch YouTube, I can hear it back. So I've not done
Yeah.
that.
So how hard to interface code in tidal cycles with external programs, for example, to generate mini notation, or is it better always to rewrite things in Haskell? Yeah, so there's quite a broad topic about interfacing with external programs through timesync, but this seems more about getting stuff in. It's quite a technical thing, which I haven't actually got Tidal running here, but it's possible to have another program and send some mini notation to it in a network message called an open sound control message, and then have that feed into your pattern quite easily. So yeah, if you want an example, then maybe ask that question on the forum, and I'll just paste in some example code or link to some examples. I think that a pretty important difference when you start with a prepared set, the number of function you use can change very much. Okay, yeah, so the more prepared you are, the more functions you can use. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's
It's
absolutely
a very
fair.
different approach, really, isn't it? It's the more prepared you are, it'll completely change the flavor and the focus of the set. Be able to do much more complex things, but also, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's totally like a valid and acceptable approach as well. I think
Yeah.
it's just because me and Alex are both people who are a bit like tend to start from a blank screen and tend to only use a small number of functions. I don't want to give the impression that that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I think actually, if you want to have like use 50 different functions in your set, that's awesome. And I'm sure, you could do amazing creative things with that. It's just not what either of us do. So I wanted to make sure that was presented as an alternative,
Yeah.
which maybe I didn't do very clearly. But yeah, absolutely, you can definitely do that. And it can be really, really great.
Yeah, because there's this guy in Sheffield, Titch from Off Net Records, and he's like the probably the most prolific producer of all kinds of dance music in Sheffield. And he does live coding and always has absolute bangers. He writes very little code live, but people absolutely love it because it's really structured and very well prepared. He spends a lot of time on each set.
He spent so much time. Like, he did that Christmas set and he'd like spent hours like recreating
Yeah.
like Christmas carols. It was so
Happy
good. It was
hardcore
absolutely
Christmas.
amazing. It
Yeah.
was so happy heart. It was the most bizarre happy hardcore Christmas live coding set where he
Yeah.
was like dressed as Santa and like doing Santa shout outs on the mic.
Yeah.
And like there's no way you could do a set like that from scratch.
No.
So there's
Yeah.
definitely more than one approach.
Yeah. And it's good to have a variety of things at events as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Lucy says, would we be able to get a list of the functions you prefer and a few you've mentioned, maybe with a summary of what they do to reference when we're practicing in our own time?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that.
Yeah, I could write down my favorites. I've got a file that I've got with the things that I use, and most of them are listed on tidalcycles.org as well, with examples. The documentation is lagging behind a bit at this point, but actually through this Tidal Club, all this documentation I'm producing will find its way back up into the public. So this is a really good way of funding.
What Alex is saying is he sometimes uses secret functions
Yeah.
that nobody else knows about.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Basically.
secret functions. Sometimes it's because they're going to change and still, but other times it's because I haven't got around to documenting them.
Yeah, I'll post
Okay,
in the forum. I'll make
we
a post about
have a question from Sebastian. Hey Lucy, do you have your own YouTube channel, or is this your mention set? Not sure what I mean.
Oh, I don't have my own YouTube channel, but I do have a website that I don't know. Can you like put it up on the screen? I don't know how it works. Maybe I can do. Can I share my screen? I'm on Bitsy. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, you can do a screen share on Jitsi in the. Yeah, there's a picture of a screen in the bottom left.
Oh yeah, I got it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my own website. A little bit of shameless self-promotion. So it's heavy-lifting.org here. And if you go to my shows page, any of them that have got a video will have a link. So that's my very first set in the 17th of June 2016. You can see that I've played quite a few. And if you click on that, it's not going to show you it, but that's the link, and it's a little YouTube video with apparently it's blocked in this country, which seems a bit strange, but I don't know where my computer thinks I am. But yeah, if you go on my website, heavy-lifting.org, and go on the shows tab, there's loads of video. Anytime there's a video, I've linked it on there. So if you're interested, you can go check them out.
Cool. Yeah, you've gone massive now, and I can't remember how I managed to get a side by side. Oh, there it is. There. Okay, so what's the name of the other live coding language? So someone else has replied to that. Foxdot, which is the answer. I think it's foxdot.org is the website. Yeah. And if you search for TopLap, I think it's All Things Live Coding. All Things Live Coding. Or is it Awesome? I'll post the link on the chat. There's actually a lot of different live coding systems, and that's kind of the more or less complete list, including things like Troop for sharing, for collaborating and things. Okay, Anna Alfsina says, thank you, Lucy, for sharing your experience. It's nice to see more and more women in the live coding scene. Yeah, that's a good thing.
It is. Still need more though.
Yeah. But that's more of a comment than a question, I think. Are there any more questions? We've been going for half an hour. So that might be a good... have we kind of more or less covered what we said we were? Oh, we've got one from Bernard. Did you guys see the Sheffield live coding scene go from 0 to what appears to be from Australia massive?
Well, you presumably did, Alex. I think I missed the very start.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the thing is that Sheffield might seem massive if you read like media representations of it, but it's quite a small city actually, and the events we run, we're really happy if 50 people show up, you know.
50 people come, that's amazing. That's the best thing ever. I think it's like, I read this book called Please Kill Me, which is like, it's called An Oral History of Punk, and it's just written by this person who was like there when punk happened in like CBGBs in America in the 70s. And they said this thing that was like, what you've got to realize about punk is it was 100 people.
Yeah.
It was the same 100 people who were like in every band, going to every show. Like they make out like it's this massive thing, but at the time everyone was like, what the hell's that? Who cares? And I think it's kind of similar with live coding. Like you read these things about like Algorave being the future of dance music. And it's like, well, like 20 people came to our show last week. Like, just, you know, I think, it's easy to think it's something that's.
Yeah, and also it's been the future of dance music for quite a long time now.
Yeah, but when did you start live coding? 2000? Ages ago. 20 years ago.
I'm not completely sure. I thought it was 2003, but then I found something where we were advertising an event where we'd be editing Perl scripts live in the year 2000. So, so yeah, I've been doing it for quite a while, and it has been quite nice seeing things grow from just being a few people in Hamburg at a meeting to this international thing, but it doesn't really feel real. So especially Algorave, that's just ridiculous. That it's just like a bit of a joke I had making up this word. And because I was talking to my friend Nick about the idea of creating a genre. How could you create a genre from nothing? And we were thinking, well, maybe you'd have some kind of metrical structure that everyone copied or a certain sound. And we started trying to do things like make a record label called Chord Punch. But in the end, it was just this one stupid word, Algorave, that kind of caught people's imaginations. And but I remember being at like the third Algorave we ever did, which I think was on the Stubnitz in London, sort of art ship. And my friend Dave overheard someone say, yeah, I don't really know much about Algorave. This is only my second one. I'm like, we'd only done three. So it's like people are trying to work out what it is, but I think people think that someone else actually knows what it is, but actually it's just making it itself, because the people who show up actually decide what it is for themselves.
It's not anything. I had a great description of Algorave on someone on some metal podcast was talking about True Yorkshire Cult Ensemble. So obviously it's like totally different context for live coding. And the guy was like, oh yeah, it's like that Algorave stuff. It's nothing like Algorave at all, like even in the slightest, but anyway. And they were like, oh yeah, it's like that Algorave's like people with doing things with chips. I was like, is it? Maybe eating them. I don't know. Truly made me laugh. Anyway, it was quite sweet. I don't want to slag off the podcast host because it was a nice bit, but it made me smile because I thought that's it. People know like the word Algorave, but they maybe don't know anything else.
Yeah, it's funny talking to people after I've done a live coding performance and they've said, so was that poetry you were typing in? Didn't realise that what I was typing
lovely.
in. Yeah.
You should have been like, yeah.
Well, it's a good question. Yeah, no,
it's nice.
Yeah, that people receive things in all kinds of ways. So, and it's nice to do something that strange that goes in these different directions. Oh yeah, so the follow-up question was, how do you see your roles in that?
Oh,
Yeah, so
juicy.
yeah, Lucy and I are kind of organisers, so we see ourselves as kind of feeling compelled to make things happen. Um, Sometimes feeling a bit overworked. Um, just before the lockdown, we were trying to make this nice collective organisation crew, because we realised that there's loads of people who want to organise things in Sheffield, but who don't because there's no kind of way of getting into that kind of thing because me and Lucy tend to do everything. Would that be a fair
Yeah,
estimation?
I think people, I mean, I even like sort of think Alex is the boss of live coding, which is wrong. And I know he doesn't want to be, but I feel like, and I know you really don't want people to feel like that, and you do things to stop people feeling that. But I think naturally we try to sort ourselves into like a hierarchy, and I think you have to actively push against that in a scene.
Yeah,
And we are doing that. We're trying to do that, but we're still sort of learning the best ways of doing that. But it's not like we deliberately set ourselves up to be like the kings of live coding
well, it's
in
a kind of
Sheffield. It just
inverse hierarchy where the people at the top are like janitors that sort of go around making sure the toilets are clean and and sort of plugging in
like
all the
literally
cables.
sometimes making sure. Yeah, so um, we are organisers, but I think we also like both are really keen to get more people organising. I think also people just don't know. Like if you've never put on a gig before, people just don't know how to do it,
Yeah,
and that can be like very intimidating. And I think like I started putting on shows in London when I was like 19. I used to put on loads of gigs and I didn't know what I was doing. I just started doing it and they were really bad and no one used to come to them. And then eventually I got a bit better at it. But if you don't know how to do that, you don't know how to do that.
yeah,
So I think that's sort of the kind of thing that I'm interested in trying to open that up a little bit for people. Something I
yeah.
never really thought about.
I'm quite envious of the scene in the Netherlands. I
Oh,
think
it's amazing.
geographically it's really nice because they have all these little cities. Well, not little, but all these cities that are very well connected together, and they travel around meeting each other. But it also seem really nicely collectively organised. That things happen
Yeah, it's
nicely.
amazing. If you live in the Netherlands, you're so fortunate. It's the
Yeah,
best life coaching.
yeah,
Really nice.
yeah. Yeah, to go to London for a gig for us would be like 100 quid or something on the train. Well, it depends on what time you'd have to go, but
It
um,
makes it really difficult. Yeah, it makes it hard. But then to go to Leeds for a gig is like easy peasy. So in some
mm,
ways, we have that. I think like we have a good connection with Leeds. I seem to play in Leeds a lot. I've
yeah,
never played in Manchester though, which is like 1 hour away.
yeah. Let's do it. Oh wow, we can't at
Never.
the
How can
moment.
that be? Anyway, um,
Yeah. Um, okay, so I think there's some more here. Oh, someone's just asked. Till is asking me to paste the website address for. Um, oh, if you search for heavy lifting, you get all kinds of health and safety.
you don't get anything about me.
Yeah, it's got a hyphen, so heavy-lifting.org. That I've pasted it in now.
Thank
Um,
you.
so Alexander, do you think there will be Algamesh this year? How to get to perform? Do you need to submit a demo, scripts, music recordings? So Algamech Festival is the festival of algorithmic and mechanical movement. We're not going to apply for Arts Council funding, so if it happens, it'll be small and local. How you get to play? I do a vaguely open call, and yeah, you can submit your recordings, but we do events all through the year, and if you're passing by Sheffield, then we're happy to organise something around your visit. It's always nice to host people. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, just drop us a mail if you're passing by. But obviously things are a bit different at the moment, and I think events from now on will be very different if they do happen. I was talking to other people organising festivals in Sheffield, and they are planning for November, which is when Algamec would happen, but for much reduced capacity because people have to be much more spaced out and things. So it's quite hard to think about. So actually, we're not thinking about Algamec for the next few months because there's all kinds of other distractions going on. Hope you're all well, and I hope all your families are well. But if you're passing through in the future, then please let us know.
Yeah, we'll definitely book you.
Yeah.
Also, you can stay at my house too if you're just like nearby and you want to come and play a show.
Yeah, meet your rabbit. Meet your rabbit. Yeah. So, Mattia, Lucy, what's your opinion about the waiting time that happens between thinking and coding a new musical idea and the ongoing one? Or is it functional to the performance or just a byproduct? That's a really interesting one.
Oh, that's a really great question.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it anymore, like very much. I think it's quite important. I don't know if this really answers your question, but thinking about time, I think it's quite important for me anyway when I'm playing live to try to stay kind of grounded, because I think it's really easy to get just sucked into looking at your screen and looking at the code, and like maybe if you do something that you're not so happy with, like trying really quickly to correct that. And I think I have to often remind myself to kind of take a step back and actually just let things breathe, and maybe don't write any code for a little bit and just listen to what's going on a bit more. And so I would say it's probably beneficial to have that thinking time, and it's something that I don't always allow myself to do. Like I think I can get a little bit, particularly when I'm playing solo, I don't find this so much in type, but I think I can feel a little bit of pressure to be constantly like changing and typing and updating and moving things forward. But actually, like sometimes it's nice to just let something play, and that's something I've been like consciously trying to get better at. So it doesn't quite answer your question, but I think thinking time is really important alongside listening time while you're playing, and giving yourself space to breathe and not feel like I have to be constantly like writing a really complicated function or doing something really amazing. Like sometimes it's nice just to let like a drum beat settle for a bit.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a pattern that's like maybe like polymmetrical, just letting that kind of play out can sometimes be really nice. What do you think, Alex?
I agree with all that. I think I think it's nice to listen back to sets and realize, kind of reflect on how fast those changes are going. I think watching other people perform, I do like those points of indecision where you can see people type something in, delete it, and then, and even though nothing's happening, it still feels very musical to have that thinking visible in a way. I don't tend to read people's code, but I kind of like seeing those points of hesitation, and but I think in the back of my mind, I'm always kind of counting. So I'm kind of thinking I need to make a change in the next 8 or usually a power of 2, 8 or 16 cycles. And it doesn't matter what it is, there needs to be a change at that point. That's not always the case, but definitely if I'm making dance music, I want there to be a really regular point of change. So that kind of really fits that thinking time into a grid. I think it comes from doing a little bit of DJing in my youth, not only on my friends' turntables, but that's all about counting as well, because if you don't get the powers of 2 to align, then the records aren't going to mix together if it's techno. And I think that can apply to, if you're making techno, then it's useful to have that counting. If you're doing anything else like improvised music, sort of improvised kind of free improv, I mean, in the kind of jazz sense, then that kind of goes out the window and you don't have to worry about the grid anymore, and you're much more free to work with time in a much more flexible way. But I think yeah, for me, learning to live code, a lot of it is about listening and being in the time of the music rather than the time of programming.
Definitely. Also, you can write a line of code and you don't have to hit go right away.
Yeah.
Like you can time when you hit go. I sometimes forget that, and I'm like, oh, that was really clunky.
Yeah. If
That's what I
I'm
mean about getting too like into the text.
Yeah, if I've slept really well the night before, I can find myself do things like prepare a bit of code and then go back to change something else and then leave that for later. That doesn't happen very often.
I sometimes do that. More often, I write half a line of code and be like, oh crap, I need to change blah blah, and then and then I come back to like, why is there just this random? It's like, what is that?
It can feel like that spinning plates on sticks,
A
where
little
you're
bit,
kind of keeping that one going and then running over there, and having multiple patterns going at once. Cool. During the tutorial sessions, are you planning on doing an in-depth session on sequencing MIDI? That's definitely something that's on the cards. Something you've done before in workshops.
Yes.
So
it's not hard.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as everything else, but I think it's more about setup, isn't it? And
it's the setup. Yeah, you need to do write a little bit of code in Super Collider to set it up, and then it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Do that.
So what are the experiences with playing together with musicians with live instruments or other DAWs? I just wanted to mention actually Bloodsport, which is the band that Lucy's collaborated with as Heavy Bleeding. They made a sample pack, and that's in the example. In the extra samples pack, it's the one starting with BS, so you can play with Bloodsport as well. The experience of playing together with musicians with live instruments. I guess the question is, how does that differ, or how does it work?
It's hard. I think. So the setup that we had, it was tricky because we had a live drummer, someone playing bass, and then someone doing kind of like loops and vocals. So I had to send. I had a horrible setup. I had two computers. I'm just remembering how bad it was. Okay, but you wouldn't need two computers now because there's better functionality. So that was a me problem. So I was sending a clock to the person with the live looping setup, a MIDI clock, so that his loops were in time with mine. And then because it was sort of pretty improvised, the set, like there were sections. You can't do it would have been very hard to do like a fully improvised set because it was so like tightly rhythmic, the music that we were making. I think if you were doing something that was a bit more drony, it would be a bit easier. But I had to work very closely with Flora, our drummer, so that she could effectively stay in time with me, and so that she understood the transitions that like when transitions would be taking place. So in that sense, it was quite a lot like playing in a traditional band using a traditional instrument myself. So we had to do, that kind of communication, like making sure you're checking with that person, having kind of audio cues, because she obviously had no idea what I was typing because she was facing away from the projector, so she couldn't. And also when you're playing drums, you can't be like sat there reading somebody's code at the same time. But I think because Bloodsport have been playing together for so long, like they were a very tight and coherent unit themselves. So it was more about me kind of fitting into that, and I think like being able to work with Flora, and we spent hours and hours practicing, and a lot of the practices we had were actually just me and Flora. So we would be working on how we got those transitions tight and how we made that work. And then I think the rest of the band were able to kind of feed off of what she did, because that's what they would do when they were playing live themselves. So she would always be kind of guiding them into different sections and how that would work. So there definitely were, Yeah, there were times when it was difficult, but I think really it's just a lot of practice. I think the same with any, any band. The more you practice, the tighter you are, and the more you get to understand like another person's approach to playing and improvising, and how you understand better to fit in with that. And I think like I'm not a very like technical musician. Like I'm not like trained in music or anything like that. So I just a lot of it's about feel. And I think you get that feel by practicing together a lot. And like with Type, we practice every week, regardless of whether we have a gig or not. And every single week we have a jam. And I think you just learn how another musician works that way. And I think, if you've played in a traditional band where you're all playing live instruments, or if you're playing in a live coding band, like those are the kind of things you need to work on to flow well together. And like sometimes it's fun to do, like when me and Alex play, we don't ever practice. I think we've practiced like twice ever, but we've definitely played more shows than we've had practices. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's for sure. And that's different because we're, the way we're approaching it is very on the fly. And I think that works in that context. But I think like if we were to play a big gig, I would like want us to practice a lot. Maybe Alex
Yeah.
wouldn't be. But I think it's not about like having a pre-prepared set or having certain things that you do, but about getting that feel with another musician of like where you're likely to go next.
Yeah, it's about anticipation. I think that's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've played with instrumentalists as well. Had a nice collaboration with my friend Matthew E. King called Canute, and it got we practiced a little bit. I mean, he's in London, I'm in Sheffield, but we managed to practice, and it got to the point where I was really able to anticipate changes, and we were just working together, so you could feel the music build up, and then it just changed at the same time. And that's a lot to do with the power of two thing. So you kind of know there's going to be a change there, because that's what dance music tells you is going to happen, which is good for collaboration. But it feels really good when it happens, like when you both decide just to cut everything out and go down to something minimal, and you do it together. It's just the best feeling.
Yeah.
But then I've also worked with a free jazz percussionist, Paul Hessian, and there's just no fixed tempo at all. It's just all over the place, and it's much you're kind of struggling with each other rather than working together, and that's another kind of approach, and it works really well as well. So there's just as many approaches as there are collaborations, but yeah.
Yeah, have a go. If you want to do it, I would just recommend find a friend who will play guitar or whatever, and just get together and see how it goes.
Yeah, with Matthew.
Sometimes collaborations don't work out as well, by the way. Like you might start something and be like, this is a clash, it doesn't work. And that's okay.
Or it can be amazing, but then you can fall out socially, and but being together in a performance, traveling around, can be quite hard work in lots of different ways. So I was just going to say that there's ways of synchronizing as well, but with percussionists, with instrumentalists, that's quite hard, and you have to work with click tracks and things. But with DAWs, there's Ableton Link, which is a way of synchronizing, which does work. But we'll look at that later on. Right, I'm starting to flag a bit. We're getting... Yeah, we've been going 50 minutes, but there's still questions coming.
Let's try to walk on that. So let's answer these questions.
Okay, so this would be the last questions, I think, because I'm starting to lose my mind. So I second everything I second everything you said, especially about how easy overcomplicating is. Sometimes when I listen back to my performances, I find poor articulation in terms of musical events and silence. Yeah. Having bits of silence and working in, if you've got loads of patterns going on at once, sometimes actually having a bit of space really helps. We'll look at mask and things, functions like that.
Something Ryan's really good at, Ryan Kirkbride. If you watch any of his solo sets, he performs as Kirky, Qirky. He has got a YouTube channel. He's really great at using silence. There'll just be like a second where it's like, and then it all comes back in. It's really good.
Yeah, that's something to think about for a future session. And this is Mattia continues, although this really depends on the main goal of the performance. Thanks for the discussion. Appreciated. Okay. And sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Really sorry. Hi, thanks a lot. One question: is it possible to record sounds on Tidal as you are performing live for improvised sampling? Yes, it is. Yeah, there is a live looper. Let's look at that later on. It's not something I've actually used very much. I used to be in a kind of world music band for a couple of months where I was sampling the voices of the singers and re-synthesizing them, and that was really fun. So let's look at that in the future. And Alexander says, thank you. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to learn from you. Hope there will be a chance to come to Sheffield later this year. Cool. I hope so too.
You're very welcome. Please do come if you can.
Yeah. And we should also have some like jamming sessions as part of Tidal Club as well. It's quite hard with there being 300 of us, but we'll try and work that out, how to do that. Maybe we can set up some collaborations where...
Yeah, we can have some like fairy rings, just where people informally, if they want to get together and have a jam.
We could have Tidal Club Radio where people can just drop in and play to us listening, or have things where people remix each other's patterns and things like that. Is there support for high order tonal and rhythmic patterns? There's definitely support for high order stuff. We'll look at melodies and things in a couple of weeks. Things like canons and things. It would be good fun. Right, I think we should bring this to a close then. This has been really fun. Thanks, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alex.
So Lucy's going to get more involved in leading on the Tidal Club, I think, with some worksheets and videos and things maybe. Or, well, we haven't fully discussed how it's going to work, but we'll, there she is, and we'll be doing some things as things go on. So sure, I've lost the power of words. So
that's all right. You better go. It's been quite a long chat.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, and
thank you.
See you later on. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Bye.